Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another episode of What's in a Performance, the series where I take scores and performances and break them down, analyze them, and then I guess make a video about it, because what fun is it just keeping all that to myself? Today we've got a very interesting episode. This is the first time I'm not analyzing my own performance, but I'm analyzing someone else's, and it's for a very specific reason. So if you guys haven't checked out my friend Winter's channel, link down below and up top somewhere. Winter's a great pianist who's on the up and coming, and if he's not already better than me, he's going to be better than me someday. If you don't follow Winter, and if you don't follow Anime Pianorama, also linked above and down below, they had a competition when they both put out the performances of Animenz's Unravel. So I thought it would be pretty dope to compete with Winter on another Animenz arrangement. So in a few months, we're both going to be putting out our videos of My Dearest 10-year anniversary version. My Dearest is probably my favorite Animenz arrangement, and it is really hard. One note about Animenz arrangements in general and his playing is that yes, it's very virtuosic, yes, it's very impressive technically, but what's incredible is that it all comes together to make this beautiful work of art. For me, the way I describe playing Animenz is like playing Chopin or Liszt. It's very technical, it's very showy, it's very flashy in a lot of ways, and yet once you get it, it's not particularly uncomfortable in the fingers, and once you get it, you see why the technical aspects are added and how they add to the story and the storytelling and stuff like that. With that being said, my favorite Animenz arrangement, My Dearest, coming right up. Let's get it! Alright, so here we go with My Dearest by Animenz. We've got the sheets here, hot off the press. It's gonna be great. Wow. So one thing that I already know off of his earlier My Dearest is that his touch already feels more sophisticated. The swell was there before, but this one it almost feels like exquisite. Right, like the right emphasis on the right notes is placed while the rest of the notes are like building within the pianissimo dynamic. And just some really nice voicing there. Wow. Alright. So this... Oh, look at that. Okay. So there's like 3 levels here, right? In terms of the voices. And it's all within like a pianissimo dynamic, except for maybe the top voice, the main melody line is coming up to a piano. So we have the da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's like the lowest, yet it's still building and swelling within that like low register. And then you have the bass notes, right? A layer above, right? And then you have the right on top. And I mean, the practice that goes into being able to do that while not making it like too thick with the pedal is quite insane. Look at that weight going into the keys. Dum. Well, all finger, right? But the rhythm is very clean as well. And another thing with these chords is that it's like the top note that keeps getting voiced, right? Like the rest of the chord isn't like overbearing and overwhelming it. Same thing with like the levels and layers that I talked about before, right? The top voice is on top, but then you have the bass notes like right below it, and then like the stuff in between below that. And now the bass is like building with it too, right? Stretched. This part of the arrangement is really cute, right? Because it's like top voice and then lower voice. And there's enough contrast already because of the fact that we're jumping voices, or jumping an octave. And so it changes the energy. But on top of that, his touch changes slightly too. Right, so we listen to it. lighter, perhaps a bit heavier, right? And then right. So the touch, even a little bit of the weight and the finger action changes to give it a slightly different color and a different dynamic beyond just, you know, we're changing an octave. Wow. Playing all that with such accuracy, right? Triplets on top of the you know, threes on top of twos. It's impossible to talk about Animenz, as I've already done, without talking about the voicing, right? And it's like the proper application of the weight, and also while the top voice is standing up and singing the way that it's supposed to, everything in the accompaniment below is also swelling and singing in his own right. And that's like this whole like da 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 da, like the run before. I'm not even gonna try to play it. Like the left hand here, right? You feel it building. The dynamic is building slightly while the right is still playing all this stuff, and he changes like in color depending on the octave that he's going towards, via like weight and like how much finger that he's putting in, right? Right? So rolling of the wrist, and then look, he's pushing in with weight so that it doesn't get too harsh, and so that he's able to control where it's going. And here, all finger, right? Like all placing very, very precisely. He's not lifting too high, right, in order to maintain the piano dynamic, but it's very articulate and very precise in order to get that singing feel. So right there, a lot of people, I feel like, would have the tendency to come down too hard on the keys, dum bum 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 bum. But instead, he does it very controlled, right? He comes up a little bit, and it's like if you see my Beethoven video where I talk about like putting like the arm weight going up and down like this. It looks like he's doing a little bit of that, and that's how he gets like this tonality that's like heavier but not that much louder. And so he's playing with like a lot of differences between weighty and loud, and it's the contrast or like the interplay between the two that makes a lot of this voicing very interesting, right? Both in the left hand and in the right, especially with all these big chords and like with all the runs inherent in this arrangement. And see, now the left hand is super heavy as it's jumping, which is nutty, right? Because you gotta jump really fast with accuracy and precision, and yet it's still not becoming harsh, and the right hand still is shining on top. And see, like even the ornamenty stuff, right, is not overbearing on the melody, and the rhythm that the arrangement brings out, da 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 da, right? In my beginner attempts at arranging, I've found that I have to like balance a lot between like, do I want to add more elements that I hear in the song itself, and like how do I add the rhythmic elements that the percussion and the drums and stuff bring in. And I feel like this here is a great demonstration of how to do that, right? He's got a lot of the feel, right, from the bass, right? Go like da 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 da, right, as the bassist is like doing his own thing. But he's also got the drums by jumping, right? Every time there's like that, it's the snare hit here. Every time he jumps to octave, that's where the snare hits. So he's maintaining the bass element and the guitars, right? That's like going like riffing on this chord, while also including the percussive element, which is kind of insane. Oh, and these octave glisses. First, those jumps, nutty. I'm gonna have to spend hours practicing that. And I have never done octave glisses before, so this is a learning experience. I think my fingers are gonna hurt after this one. But they're all so controlled, right? It's like counted out specifically. Oh, in this part. Like this singing, lilting melody. Like there's no one note in the run that's like, this is the important note, but the whole thing is like, you're drawing like a curve, right? Like you're drawing like a one picture, like, it's like those videos you see on YouTube of people drawing perfect circles, right? Except you're drawing a whole painting without lifting your pen. And that's what this like phrasing is like, Da-da-da-dum. Like, yeah, we land on that note. We're playing to that. He's playing to that note. But you know, like all these builds, all these things. Sure, there's notes that he's playing towards. There's still direction, but the whole run constitutes the phrase, and it swells and builds and stretches in the right ways to reflect that. It's not a compliment, right? Ah, trill was so nice. The slight pull there, right? The voicing again, right? The trill is on the bottom. Oh, so if you look at his hands, right? He's trilling very, very, very close to the keys. He's not lifting his fingers. He's not trilling with 3 fingers even, right? Alternating to get a thicker trill, but he's trilling very, very close to the keys. Like, it's almost like his fingers don't come off the key, and that's how he's maintaining such a delicate touch, right? Again, you can change how loud stuff is or how articulate stuff is by simply how high you lift your fingers off the keys. And here Animenz almost with flat fingers, right? Yeah, almost with flat fingers. He's trilling on the 3rd and the 4th, which I can't do very well actually, but trilling almost with flat fingers in order to keep that like low, very low simmery, like it's the bottom layer, right? It's the bottom layer below even the bass note, and then obviously definitely below the melody. That run, right? Okay, let's hear the pedaling. Sounds almost like half pedal, right? So that it's not too thick, but I could be wrong. Oh my gosh. So it's like, yeah, you can kind of hear the difficulty, right? He wants to keep this trill on the bottom level again, right? Because it's the fill, it's the uninteresting part. But because he's trilling with the thumb and the index, which again I'm very poor at, which is something that I'm gonna have to learn for this, it's a bit heavy and it's a bit hard to control. So while the bass notes are still like on top, there's a certain sense of tension, right? Like a competition between the two. And if I were to critique this performance so far, this is the only thing that stands out as like something that could possibly be done better, but it's like very slight and you barely notice it because of how well he's done it before and how even here, right, he's able to hide the deficiency. Perhaps this was intentional, but for me, I would be like, if I played this way, I would be a little bit like, oh, I want this a little bit lower. But again, very difficult. And also because it jumps the octave, right, it just stands out that much more, but it's all building, right, naturally. Like even here when he doubles up even here when he doubles up the melody, right, it's still like part of that build. It's not all of a sudden like heavy and like loud. The build, right? Love how everything drops out, right? And it drops back down. But keeping all this in sync is going to be really hard. Especially with those runs. The left pedal, right? So he uses left pedal here. So I've never talked about left pedal before, but I prefer to use left pedal to change the color and the tone of the instrument rather than help me play a piano. And this is very nicely utilized left pedal, right? It changes the color and the tone from what it was before to like a more delicate touch, right? And also because now we have a lot more, he has a lot more notes and he's like pedalizing, right? It helps with keeping the dynamic down as well and taming the loudness and the thickness that could come through. So that jump and the articulation, right? That's like, it's like almost like a bell, right? It's like boom, or like a gong, right? It rings out, and that's why it's so, like even compared to the melody, is loud. It's sustained, right, throughout the rest of the next 2 beats, and so it needs to be able to ring out. It needs to take up space, and even if at the expense of the melody, because it's going to decay a little bit, and so it doesn't actually fight with the melody because his phrasing of the melody is still so well, right? Like da 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 da. Even though he has all these other notes to play, but it adds, right, that girth that he's looking for. Look at these runs, dude. Like putting that weight in there. Yeah, not a single run played without direction, right? He's always playing to that top note or like that next chord or the da 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 bum 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 bum, right? He's going somewhere. He has direction and there's a phrase to it. He's not just playing chords for the sake of playing chords. And he's like, if you notice, right, weight coming down a little bit from above to get more of that articulation, right? Like a little bit more attack. without becoming harsh, right? That's also an incredible thing that he's doing. Not becoming harsh when he's coming from above, which is really hard to do. Right, playing to that, you see him lean in. He's leaning in, yeah, because he's expressive, but it's also because he's driving weight into that top note, right? As I discussed, I think in the Beethoven video, like going all the way, like when you place a note, right? You roll the wrist and you push in with weight. And just a simple act of adding that body weight in, right? This is more than just arm weight pushing into that note. This is your body weight going in as well. Because you're playing loud, this is like a fortissimo for this whole run. The only way you're going to be able to do it is if you're putting in more than just finger, right? Sure, your fingers have to be strong and very articulate, but you also need to put in some arm weight and some body weight in order to make that happen. And that's what he's doing, especially once he gets to the top note, really driving in with that arm and with the body, right? And that's why he leans in, which is so cool to see. Playing piano is almost like a dance, right? Like that you have to dance to some extent. You can't just sit here and play. You have to put your body into it, which is so cool. And Animenz does it really well. Right? And it feels like even the chords, the notes that he hits at the top, at the peaks, have a direction, right? He's going to da-da-dum, right? Each one gets a little bit louder, each one gets a little bit more articulate. And that's like, if you'll notice, right? Yeah, it's like he comes up a little bit higher and like, he prepares for those notes a little bit more in order so that he's able to articulate them a little bit more clearly so that he continues building that direction and that phrasing. Wow, this is really technically intensive as well with the runs and like the timing and stuff like that. Left hand standing out, right? So easy to play that left hand too heavy and he doesn't. Right, it's all finger, if you notice. He's not pushing much. Oh, these chords, right? He's just with the arm weight, right? Up and down a little bit. I love this technique. Like when you go crossover and you just brush the keys. Like this, you get like, it's this very interesting texture, right? That just comes through. So it's like a mezzo forte. And then now he's driving the weight in. Look at him drive the weight in. Left hand, right? He's jumping, but so much weight going into the keys. I talk a lot about weight, but the weight is so important. How you manage your body weight and your fingers, like articulating stuff. It all has to come together. So perhaps one more criticism is that here, da 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 da, it doesn't sound very connected, but looking at the score and obviously just by hearing it, right, it looks very difficult to connect. It sticks out to me a little bit because I expect to hear the melody like da 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 instead of bum 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 bum. But again, it looks like a choice that he's going for, right? He wants each note articulated like da 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 da, like punching it in almost, because this like towards the end, right? Right? There's the articulation again, right? And him driving way into keys. Like, look at him lean forward. Oh my gosh. You see that with the tremolo? Small, big, 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 big. Bigger, bigger, bigger. And now he's like super large, right? And then wait. You know? And coming down from above slightly. I can't stress enough how hard it is to come down from above and not be harsh. And to use that as a way to add extra articulation. Because the general feeling is I want to slam, right? And man, these arpeggios aren't easy either. And again, still direction. Just like nothing in this score feels like is written for the sake of like writing it, right? Like it's not like, oh, I just want to make this harder, which is why I'm going to throw in arpeggios. But it's like, how do I make something grand, right, and very large between these chords to give it like a sweeping feeling, like bum 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 ba-da-dum, right? Animenz, I think in his video descriptions, described his new this like new Animenz arranging style as more orchestral. And I really do have to agree, right? It's kind of like for me when I played Litz, right? I'll go back to Litz Hungarian Rhapsody number 2. Litz Hungarian Rhapsody number 2, yeah, is very difficult and very technically intensive, kind of like this piece. What's interesting about Hungarian Rhapsody number 2 is the fact that Liszt also wrote orchestra version of it, right? And when you go and listen to that orchestra version, you're like, wait, for a guy to be able to hear an orchestra like that in his head, and then to get it onto the piano, it really shows, right, in the way that it's written. And you get that with Animenz. Yeah, this is why Animenz really is the GOAT, right? Like, we like to say a lot in the ani-piano community and like general YouTube community that Animenz is incredible, Animenz is so good. But you can really tell that the guy's put in his hours, he's put into practice. I want to call it partially talent, but also this is very much so a product of the grind. This is very much so a product of constant, consistent practice, very much so a product of critical listening that one only develops after being very patient and being very dedicated to the craft. And this is what makes art like this incredible. You can tell he's put in the work. You can tell that he's refined his style, because you go back and listen to some of his older stuff, it doesn't sound like this, right? It sounds great, but there are runs for the sake of runs. There are arpeggios for the sake of arpeggios. But here, everything is building, sweeping, and the way he hears things has become more refined, and the way that he's able to express it in an arrangement has become more refined as well, which is, quite frankly, incredible. And I hope that someday I can, even come close to being able to playing the way that he does, right? Being able to express and sing and get to coax the piano to say the things that I wanted to say the way that he does. And again, right, we're going back to the opening. It's like recalling the intro. Right, so you can see, right, again, the fingers all completely, almost completely flat in the right hand, and he's playing really close to the edge for maximum control. But the left hand, right, the parts that are voiced, that hold the melody, he's articulating with slightly more wrist and more finger lift, whereas the parts that aren't holding the melody, they're still played very close to the key as well. His pinky barely comes off the keys, whereas his thumb and his index comes slightly off in order to give it more articulation, and he rotates the wrist to add a bit of weight. Ooh, that's a deep D. It looks intentional though, because he did it twice. It's like he's playing with this part of the finger instead of like here. And it's perhaps to drive a bit of that weight in a more subtle way. Once you progress beyond the beginner phase or intermediate phase even, and you start messing around with where you press the key, because your fingers are strong enough and you know what's safe and what's not important, you can start doing these sorts of things, right? Like, no longer are you just playing on the tip, but you're adding, some of this to see what sort of resonance you get, or like to get that dynamic given the hand posture and position at the time of playing. Right, you see just weight coming down. He almost lost a note, I think, but he didn't, which is good. So delicate, right? And this is off. Looks like his off finger, and there's a little bit of arm for on the important landing notes, right? That he's playing towards, a little bit of arm sliding in. You'll actually notice this a lot with some pianists, or sometimes a sliding into the keys. Like for me at least, when I'm driving way into the keys and I want a really loud forte, then I don't slide quite as much, right? Because I'm just landing. But for stuff like this, you want this to come from a very controlled weight that's coming into the keys, both from the arm and a little bit from the body. And it gives you again, it's very similar to this up and down, right? Just coming down to keys like this, except there's a little bit more change in the tonality that doesn't really, I think, come through on an electric piano like this, which comes through a lot more on a grand. But you're sliding in a little bit because the weight is no longer going in at a 45-degree angle to where it sticks, but it's almost dissipated slightly to give it a bit of a softer touch while still in the piano dynamic. And the articulation. You hear multiple voices, right? It's so difficult to play slow and delicate stuff, right? Because you mess with the tempo and you want to hiccup or move forward a little bit more. But here he doesn't drag, right? It doesn't feel like he's pulling too much, and he's not pushing forward. It's just he's sitting on each note and each phrase just the right amount to give it the space that it needs to sing, essentially. Ooh, there's almost like a bell, right? You can almost hear like the bell tower, like boom, right? And it's like calling back to something else, and you get that, and he picks up the tempo, right, to affect that, and he's playing it louder, right, and with a little bit more pedal. Like it's almost like, I could be mistaken, but right, the pedal is held. If you look at the video, the pedal is held before he even presses down on the key. So the difference between holding the pedal and playing on beat here is that holding the pedal down before you press on the key already has the piano opened up. The strings are already vibrating even just a little bit because of the mutes coming off. So he already has the resonance of the instrument built into like whatever he's playing next, and he just comes down and the whole instrument is ready to vibrate. When you're coming down an on beat, there's a bit of that gap where your fingers come down and the mutes are just barely coming up, right? And when the mutes are still very close to the string, it still restricts some of that vibration. Whereas if you have the mutes up already, then the piano, again, as I said, the air is already going around the piano in a slightly different way, and you're already getting some of that resonance before you even play the note. He's not changing either, right? Which just speaks to the way he's articulating. Because it's hard to keep this without making it cluttered, right, and sounding weird. But because he's phrasing properly and because he's giving enough space, it rings out enough so that he's able to play the next note without it becoming a little bit muddy. Slight build, right? He's adding more weight. You can see his fingers getting more and more tense as he's putting more and more weight into it. This is all weight, and gosh, that is hard. These jumps, oh my god, even with the allargando or the ritardando or whatever you want to call it, they're still ridiculously hard to hit all these with increasing weight and a crescendo into this final sforzando and to end, right? So. And the flourish, the rightfully deserved flourish, right there, and holding out that note. Beautiful. Thank you, Animenz. Really. Wow. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of this video and getting through that analysis with me. I hope that this really does open your eyes and explain a lot more of what Animenz is doing, and perhaps even explain some things that you can add to your own playing when you work on his arrangements like Unravel. With that being said, thank you all for watching this video. This video was brought to you, as usual, by my music production company, Just Be Records. Links are in the description. You need mixing, mastering. If you want to get personal performance reviews and critiques and stuff like that, there's a way you can do that now. There's a link down below for Buy Me a Coffee. You can go check out my page. Support me by purchasing a video review from me, and I will give you the same treatment that I do for myself and for everyone else. With that being said, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if this video was useful and informative to you. And if you want to see more analysis or listen to music, you can click one of these links here. Until next time, peace.